But I want to get started. We have a lot to cover, and I think it'll be a good session. Thanks all of you for attending the AWS Summit here in San Francisco. We're very happy to have you, very pleased with the number of people that have chosen to spend some of their time talking with us. And I hope you got a chance to see Andy Jassy's keynote at the event. There was some pretty good information in it about some of our offerings and some good examples of enterprise customers that are using the AWS service to accomplish business objectives. The goal of this session, and I hope you're all in the right room, is to dig a little bit deeper into some of those use cases that we're seeing with enterprise firms and really just have a candid conversation about what those look like and what works and what doesn't work. My name is Andrew Reichman, and I lead enterprise marketing at AWS, and I'm very pleased to have three esteemed panelists, and as well, I'm very pleased to have very few slides. This is my last slide, and I think you'll all be happy that we won't be droning through that. So, starting to my right, we have Srini Yalamanchili, who is the head of technical manager at Unilever for digital marketing, and we have Raj Sampath Kumar, who is with CSS and is the account manager, the technical account manager for Unilever. So these two will be talking about their specific situation as they work quite closely together day in and day out. I'm told that Raj reports to a desk on site at Unilever and is there every day working together with Srini. And then to Raj's right is Sean Perry, who's the CIO at Robert Half International. And so Sean, I believe you've traveled the least far as you're a local product. So with that said, could I ask each of you to briefly introduce yourselves and your company? Just give us a quick snapshot of what the company does and where you're at from a business perspective. Sean?
So Sean Perry, CIO for Robert Half International. As Andrew mentioned, we're based out of Menlo Park and San Ramon, just outside in the Bay Area here. A number of members from my team in the crowd, yay. Been encouraging them to come to events like this so that we can come up to speed on the cloud. Now, what Robert Half International specifically does is we're a staffing and professional services placement firm. So we have a number of brands that you're probably familiar with, like Account Temps and Office Team and Robert Half Technology. So that's the primary business that we're in. And from an IT perspective, what we do is support all the infrastructure required to manage and deliver that work. So whether it's billing for our clients or paying our temps or helping to provide the infrastructure to run different engagements, that's essentially what we're doing. So very much traditional IT, the types of things that most of you are probably involved in. You know, we have Peoplesoft systems, Oracle systems, a wide variety of heterogeneous infrastructure. So.
And how big is Robert Half?
From an employee perspective, about 12,000 employees, about $4.5 billion in market cap.
Okay, great. So Srini,
yep.
Unilever.
Yeah, so my name is Srini Yalamanchili. I work for Unilever. I'm working there for the last 15 years in different areas of IT. Right now, my position is managing technology and innovation and the tools required for digital marketing services, whether it's a CMS product or a CRM or a vendor evaluations to running POCs and running the RFPs and finding the right technology and putting a service wrap around it with companies like CSS. So we do customize a lot of things before it gets productionized and delivered to enterprise services team who manages everything. My job stops at building and deploying that to production and then having another team manage that for us. So I have team members all over in the world, few guys in India and few in UK, a couple of them in Brazil. So but majority of the team, including the security manager, web security guys, they're all based out in New Jersey. So we currently have anywhere from 2 to 2.5 thousand websites for all our brands across the globe. Right now, I don't know if you want me to answer that question, Andrew. So we started this cloud journey almost early 2010. Right now, we have 1,300 plus websites running in AWS in 3 different regions. So that's a high level.
Yeah, and so is that the majority of your
Exactly.
branded
Yeah,
websites?
exactly. And we are in the process of migrating remaining websites by the end of this year.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we'll get into some of the details and the metrics
Yeah,
associated
sure.
with it. I want to give Roger just a chance
sure.
to tell us who CSS is and what your role is.
Hi, this is Rajakumar Sampath-Kumar, and I work for CSS Corp. I belong to the solution engineering vertical of CSS that does infrastructure management services. So we do offer infrastructure management services for physical, virtual, and cloud service providers. And specifically about the engagement that we work with Unilever, we initially started with the vision of taking numerous number of websites into the cloud, and we actually worked with Unilever in terms of strategizing how to take these websites into the cloud. And since Amazon is an infrastructure as a service provider, we built a platform on top of Amazon, basically with a set of tool sets that's available in terms of API integrations, and also made sure that all these services that are bundled on top of Amazon Web Services are monitored 24/7 at an availability perspective. And we also take care of all the business services, that's basically the web properties that runs on Amazon.
Okay, great. And so what percentage of CSS business is cloud related?
I would say as a whole, CSS is a technology-driven company, and we are technology agnostic. And there is about 50% of CSS that does majority of infrastructure management services. And on that 50%, I would say about 30% is cloud-driven.
Okay, great. And so, Srini, from your perspective, you built this relationship with CSS to help you get to the cloud faster, help you accomplish these objectives and leverage their expertise?
Exactly. Right. So I went to a cloud expo in early 2010. I happened to see these guys in one of the booths, and then our journey started together. They came to us and did a good pitch about how they think about cloud, how they can customize for our Unilever needs, because we have so many different technologies in the Linux and Windows space, and so many different third-party vendors, and we cannot just build a simple solution to launch everything into the cloud. So we did a lot of deep dive into what we have today and how to take it to the cloud. We did some transformation to fit that seamlessly to the cloud. That journey took us 1 year to think about and design with Amazon. We went to Amazon Seattle, sat with them for a week to understand the technologies that they're offering in 2010. Then came back with the blueprint of what we should be doing. Then we started doing a lot of POCs with CSS. We used to call them as early adapters, to test each and every area, Linux area, Windows area, different campaigns with the short-lived campaigns versus long-term campaigns like brand.com websites. So finally we came up with a plan to migrate everything, and then we migrated everything from our data centers to Amazon, starting Q1 2012.
And this was a departmental-led, this was the digital marketing
Exactly.
team that decided to go down this path
Yep.
with cloud, rather than it being a Unilever corporate
It
decision.
is. It happened for a reason. So we faced a lot of challenges with our previous hosting provider. We used to host them infrastructure in-house, but it should be managed by somebody, a third-party company. Their lead times were very huge. We are losing a lot of opportunity to get these brand campaign initiatives to the market. So that's why one of the reasons I had to explain this to my management, that we should look outside of our hosting and talk to people like Amazon, Rackspace, and then we ran an RFP to explain our case, and got good responses from a lot of these cloud providers. So yeah, I think it is an interesting journey, but from day one onwards, it's focused for digital marketing. Now, after this success, a lot of other areas in Unilever IT is looking forward and knocking on my door to understand what I did and how we came
Some
to
of your
this.
peers are
Exactly.
thinking they might be interested in.
Exactly, yeah.
And I know you mentioned a couple metrics when we talked previously about being able to launch products faster.
Right.
So what are some of those?
Yeah, so with the previous hosting provider, when we need to launch a huge campaign which can drive a lot of viral traffic from either Twitter or Facebook, we used to pre-build everything, and we used to have a lot of lead time. But as Unilever wants to grow and double their company in 10 years, we didn't have that lead time anymore. So the challenge is how to go to the market quickly. So with the in-house hosting provider, it's not possible. So that's why we looked at external providers. So in-house provider used to take 6 weeks to give us a code on the new hardware and take another 4 weeks to build the infrastructure before agencies can migrate their code, web code into that. With Amazon, everything happens in less than a week. I can go into much details how quickly we are doing these things, but it is the way how cloud works today.
Yeah, and so in the competitive global markets that you're in, this time is proven to be valuable.
Right. Another good example I just want to add to that, we have global brands. If one brand have success in one country, we can take that campaign and copy it to another Amazon region for another country and do some minor customization. That company's website will launch in less than 2 days.
Yeah. Regardless of where it is, it's a consistent process.
Exactly.
So it's interesting to have you up here with your system integrator, and you guys work closely together. And I don't know how many people in the room are aware of that a lot of AWS customers do use a system integrator, maybe the one that they used before they started to do things in the cloud, or maybe a different one. But it's pretty common for companies to engage the help of a third party to get better traction and leverage and move faster. Mm-hmm. Although, Sean, you don't do this. Right,
So,
you were telling me you don't have a system integrator really hands-on for every step of it.
Yeah, I think, so I view this as a fundamental shift that our IT department has to go through, right? So we're definitely committed to getting people up to speed. I think we invaded the AWS conference in Vegas with a number of people, and really are focused on getting our staff familiar with the technologies, familiar with the tools, because it's almost akin to all the other technology sort of shifts that we've been through, right? You started bringing in, you went to Solaris boxes, and suddenly people started needing to learn Unix, right? And then you deploy. I mean, these cycles happen, and this is one of those cycles. So if you're working in IT and this isn't what you're a part of, then you probably need to consider what that means for your career, right? That the examples that you cited about how you move faster. I mean, I was literally in a meeting yesterday, and we were talking about, when we finished this proof of concept that we needed for this infrastructure, we weren't sure whether we could get the hardware ordered fast enough to get it in and deploy in the data center in 6 weeks. And about that point, I'm like, I'm just going to provision the stuff in AWS and not tell them. Like, it's done. I'll have it done tomorrow, right? But it's that fundamental of a difference, that I can have that infrastructure provisioned tomorrow, and in 6 weeks I can have it automated so that I'll never ever have to do it manually again, right? The 6 week cycle that we were talking about was just 6 weeks to get the servers turned on, the operating system installed, everything else taken care of.
And then you start the hard work of actually integrating it and making it solve the business problem.
Exactly.
So when we talked, I know you said that scripting is a really big deal for you, and as much as possible, you're trying to automate steps, and so talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the bigger challenges, especially, how many people build servers by hand with the OS and install their software packages and all that stuff? I don't think, most organizations for large applications have really gotten beyond that stage, but I think it's actually critical. And so that skill set isn't something that most of ops teams that I've run into have a core skill in terms of automation, Chef and Puppet and the tools that you use to do that. And so one of the things that we started doing as part of our hiring process is, we used to never ask about scripting. Now you have to show up and know these tools and know how to use these tools before you'll make it through the interview process. And so I think we need to start looking at that and driving that as a requirement, because it's as much programming as anything else.
Yeah, it was interesting. You mentioned it wasn't even so much whether it's the specific language that you're going to use, but it's more the mindset of how to script as a new skill that's important to be an infrastructure manager or admin. It
was kind of a weird. So we've been having. We're a recruiting and staffing company, and we have trouble finding people like this. So go figure. But one of the things, we were talking to a group of analysts from Gartner and Forrester, and I said, all right, so you guys talk to a lot of client companies. What do you do to find these skills? And their answer was, what we see successful companies doing is taking entry-level programmers and teaching them operations and infrastructure. That there's more things about how the software works and writing the code and things like that are more like software engineering than traditional operations management. So that's where they were bringing people in. I mean, I thought that was a great idea, and we're sort of within our own teams trying to come at that the other way from an existing personnel's perspective, but from a new hire perspective, definitely coming at it the other way.
Definitely, as this hardware is commoditizing, the thing that differentiates for a company is using the software tools to get the value out of it.
Yeah, we had, it was interesting, I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago that Amazon invited me to, and one of the other customers that was there said something just that I'd never heard of before, and you guys might resonate with this. When we have a problem with a server, they said we just throw it away, and they build another one. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Like if somebody said, take your Peoplesoft database server and just like throw it away and configure another one, like I'd have a heart attack, right? But that was how their operations process worked. And so it just made me realize that like, but on the software engineering side, right, the equivalent is if the build breaks in the middle, like you don't sit there and spend forever trying to debug exactly what went wrong, you run it again. Right? And that's what they were saying, was that the infrastructure becomes disposable enough that frankly it's faster to recreate it from scratch and eliminate the variance than it is to try and discover all of the details about what went wrong. And that just, like that fundamental shift between like trying to babysit the one thing that you built like 3 years ago and it's now drifted so far off its configuration baseline it's not even funny, right? As opposed to I'm just going to build another one and put it in.
Yeah, so cloning and repeatability as opposed to diagnostics and fixing. What do you think? Is that similar in your environment?
That's very similar. The only difference is Unilever made a decision to outsource all these managed services a long time back. So this is not started with the cloud that we had to look for CSS-like companies, but we used to work with another company in the past for managing the websites. Then we saw there is a gap when we go to Amazon or Rackspace, some other companies. From day one onwards, we looked at the solution integrators. When we sent the RFP, we sent it to 6 other companies like CSS. But CSS came out to be good because they were very thoughtful and innovative. And they were one of the early birds who adapted the Amazon APIs and built their own software. And they provided a very good demonstration of those capabilities during the POCs or early adapter programs. So that's a win-win for both of us.
So Raj, I understand you have like a center of excellence and really know the API sets and the tool sets and everything. Does it resonate what Sean's saying about this kind of disposable server and cloning?
Yeah, I would like to point 2 of the points that Sean said. One is about the resource modeling in traditional data center and what shift that we are seeing today. We do have a team, and if you look at how CSS adopted its technical knowledge into Amazon, we were very early to get into Amazon, about say 3-4 years back, right when Amazon started with just the EC2 instances. We were very quick to grab that, and also based on what experience we have on the virtualization space. So CSS as an organization is a technology firm. So if you give a call to any of your technical devices like your routers or any of the networking devices, you will reach CSS Corp. So we are a technology firm who understand the base technology, and it was very easy for us to understand Amazon's technology because it's all going to be the same. The underlying infrastructure is going to be the same. It's about how much of visibility that you have into your infrastructure and how much of time that you have to spend in terms of administrating it. So you have less visibility into the infrastructure and you spend less time administrating it. As Sean said, we'll be able to integrate things very well in the beginning. So even today, with one point that he said, if there is a problem with one server, you throw it off. We are going to the next step wherein throwing off that server itself is not visible to us. If you set an auto-scaling group where min is equal to max equal to 1, automatically the server refreshes itself. So you won't even count the point of you throwing a server and then you provisioning a new server. So
right, it's happening in the background and you're getting the effect, but you don't even see it come and go.
Yep. So I would say that there are 2 key points for anyone who's planning to migrate into Amazon. One is about what vision you have in terms of what you're planning to build in Amazon. 2 is that how are you going to monitor and manage it. For the first part of it, you need to make sure that you are ready to spend some effort in terms of building the core piece. If you're not ready to spend that because of some business decision, you may have to do a lot of manual work as you move forward. But in traditional data center, you do not have any other option. But in Amazon, you have that wonderful feature of automation. And Amazon doesn't give that automation just like that. It is a platform where you have to automate. And you can work with solution integrators like CSS Corp, where we specifically know about certain technologies in Amazon and how to automate that. So it's not the same way as you automate an EC2 instance. You can do an internal load balancing with ELBs. So there are certain ways to do certain elements of Amazon, and that may not be directly relational to that of your traditional data center.
And so in a case like Unilever, they're going to be using CSS tools that you use at other accounts. Right?
Yep.
This is stuff that you've built,
Yep.
And reference architectures
Yep.
and guidance that you have experience
Yeah,
from.
there's no point in recreating something, but more of it, whatever that you create, that could be a script or that could be an automation platform that should complement to the technology what Amazon offers. So if you have a database instance, for example, you migrate a database instance from traditional data center or a virtual environment into the cloud, you need not build an RDS when RDS was not available about 2 years back. Rather than that, look at any options where you can build your own technologies in terms of mirroring the databases and making sure you put a witness server to monitor these two databases and do a failover. And once Amazon has that feature of having an RDS available, you migrate that to that service. And the more you use Amazon's service, the more benefits you get off the cloud. When you have RDS today, there's no point in anyone deploying an EC2 instance to run DB servers.
Right.
It's interesting, our platform changes so rapidly. And so I guess the strategy that you're saying is early on you build it yourself, and then as a feature comes that may do
Yep.
what you have built, then
Yep.
you migrate to that.
Yep,
that
immediately
service.
migrate. I mean, it could be a slow transition, but please make sure that you migrate. If you are still running any database servers that is not RDS driven and you still run in Amazon Cloud on EC2, then probably you're not saving cost.
Yeah.
Right, that's a very good point.
Is it a cost feature or is it a convenience and flexibility?
Cost, effort, and how much of time you want to spend in automating administrative tasks, monitoring tasks, so everything comes with that.
Sean, what do you think? So you don't have this company by your side building it, so you've built it yourself. What do you do for monitoring and automation?
So we're pretty focused on using the tool set that AWS provides, right? And so that's caused some consternation. So we started, part of that fast adoption or fast delivery pace for AWS means that we're just getting our heads around cloud formation when OpsWorks shows up. Right? We're like, oh, okay. But I think because of where we're at, it's fundamentally a learning process anyway. And the things that we learned using cloud formation are not useless now that we're migrating to OpsWorks. Now that and I think that's probably just a challenge, is that keeping on top of the AWS roadmap, right, is a tough thing. But I think at the end of the day, we're all learning new technologies, and what you learned in one space didn't evaporate overnight because you moved to something else. The same idea is about how I construct systems. Some of it got a little bit easier. And that's great, but the point for us is we're focused on learning the new things and deploying those things as projects dictate the requirements. Right?
And do you find that you get better over time? The more familiar you are with AWS platform, then the easier it is to integrate a new feature, and the more skill your team has.
Yeah, I think it's taken up at different rates within different teams depending upon what their focus is. I mean, it's one of the things that's really interesting is the consolidation of functions, right? And I think that some teams, at least within my organization, are still trying to figure out what they do, right, and what their role is in the new world. So if I'm the storage guy and I manage a NAS and a SAN and things like that, like what do I do at AWS? And that role exists, but I think it doesn't naturally come to people as that's what their new responsibilities are. And so
well, you talked about software engineers migrating to be infrastructure admins or managers. Well, what happens the other direction? People that were long-time hardware people, hardware managers, what's their path? What do you find that's successful with them?
Well, I think so. So look at the easiest example that I've been thinking of is our storage team, right? Who fundamentally, if you look at storage engineering in an enterprise environment, it's managing scarcity, right? So I have so much NAS and I have so much SAN and I've got RAID 10, I've got RAID 5, and I got to work with the app developers to figure it out. It's because it's a pain in the butt to provision all that stuff, right? And it's effectively, once I get it laid out, it's really hard to change it, right? Even if the GUI is nice, there's a whole bunch of change controls and processes around it. So instead, if your job isn't to manage scarcity, maybe your job is to understand the technologies that are being delivered through AWS and figure out how to take best advantage of those things, right? So what are the performance stats comparable? Like what do I get on my NetApp, and how would I deliver that same NetApp functionality at AWS at a different cost point? Right? And I think that's the transition, is becoming an expert in the new technology. It's just like, when you roll the NetApp in, you sometimes hire the NetApp guy, and sometimes the guy that was managing the HDS or Hitachi device becomes the NetApp guy. Great, he had a bunch of stuff to learn, right? It's the same thing. It's just we're not rolling it into the data center.
You benefit from the continuity that they have about the business objective they were trying to accomplish, and how your company works.
Right, and how the systems are put together and what the requirements are and things like that. And so just a matter of sort of wrapping your head around, it's not, yes, it's a fundamental shift and there's some new skills to learn, but it's not like we up and reinvented storage and now, it's totally different. It's fundamentally the same building blocks we had before.
So give us a quick snapshot, Sean, of what you're running on AWS. What are the key business challenges that you solve? I think for Srini, it's like a pretty bounded world of the digital marketing, but yours, it's more general across the whole company. So what's in there?
So one of my favorite examples is an app that we had to deploy in so we're having a big discussion about whether or not a particular feature would be useful to our users in the field offices. And there was a lot of discussion and a lot of debate, and finally we just said, look, I can build this at AWS in 6 weeks. I'll just build the thing, right? And then we'll deploy it, right? And then we'll stop having discussions, right, about
this was a net new.
Yes, we've never done it before.
You didn't have one before. It's not it wasn't a migration.
No
it wasn't
like that. It was just completely greenfields. And so literally, we went from, I think the requirement should be this, to working code delivered to branch offices in about 6 weeks. And the only way we were able to do that, right, even though we have a pretty big VMware farm, but the only way to get it done to production was to use AWS. Because at the end, if it worked, I had no idea how many people they were going to want to put on it, right? We had this pilot agreement, right? But if they said tomorrow, wow, that's a real success, you're going to roll it out to everyone, we would be in deep trouble if I had to go provision new servers. So that was a good project. I can't tell you what it was, but needless to say, it worked out.
But kind of you could take a chance on this thing that you didn't know whether it was going to A, be accepted by the business, or B, work.
Right.
And if you had to go buy gear and own that gear for 3 to 7 years, you probably wouldn't have done it, right?
Well, and also, the funny thing, so if you think about most enterprises have a virtualization farm. So I don't have to buy gear on a regular basis, right? For nowadays, I don't buy servers that often, and when I do, it's not like I need it tomorrow, right? I need to expand the size of the farm for the next projects in the pipeline. But there's still a ton of friction in getting stuff provisioned, right? Just even if you have all your change control processes in place and everything, there's just a lot of work that has to happen that by using AWS and isolating individual teams into their own infrastructures and their own setups, I can ignore a lot of that work when I need to move quickly, right? So I can effectively create sort of a partition of the data center, if you will, and say, all right, we're going to run this stuff over here, and it can't impact, I don't have to worry about its impact on the SAN or the network or any of these other things. Let them go and get it done, right? And that agility is hugely helpful. So I think that that's a big part of what we're trying to do with the cloud. And that's one example. The other examples are easy, right? If you run Peoplesoft, you have a lot of Peoplesoft instances. We'd like to have those, or we do have a number of those at AWS because they're used once in a while, right? And when we were doing a large Peoplesoft project, we had instances that were set up in North America that the users internationally couldn't get good performance against, so the team over a weekend basically shuttled them all off to Ireland, and suddenly we solved a performance problem. And if I had to do that in my data center, it would have started with ordering new servers for the Birmingham data center, right? And that would have taken weeks. So,
But I mean, as a staffing company, Peoplesoft is a pretty core
one of our
piece of what you
most important
do,
things. Yep.
but you're not scared to run in AWS. It's not.
So I think so for dev and test, certainly not. For production, we're getting there. Like one of the challenges with the way we're set up today is, I mentioned earlier on, heterogeneous infrastructure, right? So I've got a little bit of everything, and that doesn't necessarily play well because I can't, there's no Spark, M1 dot whatever in the AWS list, right? But that's what I need for my database server. So in other cases, when we look at doing updates to those applications, we're migrating them intentionally to new architectures that are compliant or compatible with AWS so that we can deploy there in the future. Even if the next step for like this PeopleSoft app isn't to move production to the cloud, the next step for us is to move to an architecture that's compatible with the AWS cloud, Linux, x86, right? So that we can then, in the next step, say, all right, now I'm comfortable running that in the cloud entirely.
Where you had mentioned that some of your Windows on VMware wasn't particularly compatible with this concept of cloning and throwing away servers.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what the dynamics of that and what your solution is?
Use more Linux. So yeah, at that same meeting I mentioned earlier, I made a few unhelpful comments, I guess it was, about AWS's support for Windows, which is not great yet. But I was quickly accosted by a number of people with business cards swearing they would get it, whatever problems. But the reality is, it seems to be that there's a lot less friction using Linux in the AWS environment. I mean, it seems to align more with the scripting models that AWS is using. Even when you look at Chef and the other deployment tools, those support Linux operating systems better. So, I mean, it's almost like in enterprise IT in my data center, Windows is easier to run because I have so much of it. I have so many people that know it. But when you move to AWS, it creates more challenges. And so we're looking pretty hard at making that shift as we move things into the cloud, saying if an application is compatible with both Windows and Linux, if it goes to the cloud, let's push it towards Linux so that we can pick up that or reduce the friction from making that change.
So I don't want to turn this into a religious debate, but what's your take where Linux and Windows comes together, and what's been your experience?
In our world, we are currently 50-50. So I think it's going to be more Windows, unfortunately, because we use a common technology platform with a CMS behind it that's based on .NET. So the CMS is Tridian. So we have this global CMS where all our brand.com websites will be built on that, and
Tridian is running on AWS.
Exactly. Yeah, Tridian is running in US East as a global CMS, and we have a regional CDS. 3 regional CDS, US East, Dublin, and Singapore. So we put all this content into the CMS and then publish them to regional CDS. So consumers will get to those CDS to browse the websites, our brand.com website. So with that said, it'll be slightly above 50, definitely always because of the CMS. But we have a lot of demand for campaigns, which are either short-lived campaigns or sweepstakes or free sample campaigns or something to do with Ben & Jerry's brand. They do Free Cone Day, and we do Super Bowl campaigns. And they're all on Linux completely because of the rich flash technologies that they wanted to build, and also the campaigns. And a lot of agencies like to use Linux-based technologies, so that's why another driving factor for us to use Linux.
Is it easier for you to accommodate the spikes? When you say Super Bowl, that sounds like spike to me, right?
Exactly. Yep. So a couple of years back, we had this campaigns become so viral and drove a lot of traffic to the website, to the origin. So it took down our data center. So with Amazon, we have this auto scaling, and Amazon, we never had the network issue. With our physical data center, we have certain limitation on the pipe. With Amazon,
so when you have 300 million people, exactly, whatever it is.
Yeah. So we have right caching solutions also in place, and with the latest technology, we're able to handle any type of campaign. If we know the traffic pattern, we most likely do the auto scaling. If we don't know, then at least we prepare to do a manual scaling.
Right.
We
You had
set
mentioned
ourselves
you
there.
got it wrong for Super Bowl, right? So you had the Axe astronaut
Exactly. So,
campaign. It was a good commercial, by the way.
Yeah, it is good commercial. So,
But you predicted more traffic than you got,
Yeah,
right? And you didn't do auto scaling, you did a manual, you actually
what we did,
spooled up instances.
the Super Bowl, you guys know, when the ad goes up and you won't have a lot of time to auto scale. So it's better to handle those situations with beefing up the environment and shutting them down slowly as the traffic spikes goes down. It's a reverse of auto scaling. So you build a massive infrastructure, then monitor the traffic and shut down a couple of web servers, app servers as the traffic spike goes down.
Right, but your risk was lower than if you had to actually buy gear, even though you got the prediction wrong, right?
Yeah.
You over-predicted, but
Yeah,
you
we
only paid
did,
for that for what, half a day?
Exactly. We did load testing using a CSS load testing team, and we maxed it to top I/O rates, and we used provisioned IOPS. We also pre-warmed ELBs and everything. We've got everything ready, and we're watching traffic, and as the traffic goes down, we shut down a couple of web servers. And the next day, we took down half of the capacity, because it is a very intensive campaign. You have 24 hours to register for the free trip to space. So it's
registration
active.
still open
Yeah,
to go to space? Or?
In US, it's closed as of this month, as of April. So, but globally, it's still available. So go and check axapollo.com. That's launched on Amazon. Yeah.
Okay, so your spike in retail is Super Bowl and
Super Bowl,
Christmas,
yeah.
December.
And Thanksgiving for all our foods websites. A lot of people go to bestfoods.com, helmets.com for recipes. We have a great website for US, makinglifebetter.com. All these websites will get a lot of traffic for foods recipes during Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday season.
Sure.
So we have to do something before that season starts and take the infrastructure down after January. Yeah. And in January, we'll spike up the SlimFast website.
People try and take it back off again.
Right.
Yeah, so we talked about spikes. It's interesting to me which industries have different spikes. Obviously, most industries have something for December
Right.
if you're retail, and Thanksgiving too, and quarter end, month end close is always big, and the tax day, April 15th.
Exactly.
I mentioned the photo sharing websites, SmugMug, et cetera. Those guys see a huge spike at Halloween, right? Because everyone posts tons of pictures of their kids and their kids' friends.
And also to do with a lot of sporting events. Super Bowl is one good example in US, but in other countries, a lot of soccer games. Brazil, they are notorious for soccer games, and whenever they go through big events, we have to build special environments for them to handle that 6 weeks to 8 weeks campaigns, and we'll shut them down. If we weren't able to do those things very quickly in the past.
What'd you do before? I mean, you just
We
kind of did
used
best
to
effort
plan well ahead of time, 6 months ahead of time.
to start buying gear and bring it into the data
Putting
center.
the gear in the data center and also working with third-party agencies to build the creative work and all that stuff. Now, everything, we don't have to spend a lot of time. All these ideas will be very fresh right before the launch of the campaign. Within a week, CSS will set up everything, staging environment and production environment, hand them over to the creative agency who is building the games or sweepstakes sites. They will test everything in Amazon, and then CSS load testing team will do the final testing. Then after that, we'll just do a DNS switch. Yeah.
So,
And
you wanna add in? Yeah.
just a couple of points on specific to the campaigns. Some best practices, maybe what we learned from the Unilever engagement. Anyone who's trying to build a website for a short-lived period or for a burst-out campaign, typically two things very important. One is to identify the bottlenecks. Where could the bottleneck be? That could be at the ELB level, that could be at a EC2 level, at a database level. So for that, you need to benchmark the infrastructure. And two is always make sure the systems are loosely coupled. And don't go with stateful systems. Because specifically for the user-generated content, we always make sure that everything is EBS-backed AMIs, and all the content will be stored on a common location. That could be NFS, that could be S3, any of the other solution where there's a common location, so that you could easily scale it. That could be auto scaling, that could be manual scaling.
When you identify that that's the bottleneck, you can scale it independently of everything else.
In this case, as Srini said, the reason why we had to manually scale, you have two options, to either auto scale or to manual scale. In both of these options, the key component is load balancing. So make sure any infrastructure that we build, it's load balanced. And the way in which we choose either auto scale or manual scale is based on how quickly we receive the information. So if the brand comes and tells to me, you have about 2 weeks time, and this is the expected traffic, I can do auto scaling because I can work with creative agencies, I can alter the code, I can make sure this will fit auto scaling. But if the brand comes to me and says that you have a campaign tomorrow, we may not be able to alter the code, so everything would mess up. So for that, the best thing that we will do is we'll make sure that we'll beef up the system and make sure that that has provisioned IOPS and whatever features that could deliver high performance, and do a benchmarking. And in that benchmarking with the Axe Apollo campaign, we approximately did about 300 million visits. And we made sure that the ELBs were pre-warmed, the databases were fine, and the elastic cache was used to make sure that caching is there. So we made sure there were no bottlenecks, and made sure that the traffic would be in a position to be served. And over a period of time, once it was over, we were able to bring down the infrastructure. And finally, for at least a couple of weeks, we were running about, say, 50% of the capacity.
So if you don't have enough time, it's maybe a little bit more clunky. You might spend a little bit more money, maybe you over provision, but you still have it there. It still works.
Yeah, we're basically solving the brand's problem. So brand works with companies like Mindshare to get the traffic patterns. So Mindshare has these scientific algorithms where they will predict and tell us that your website is going to hit after this TV commercial, you're going to see this much traffic. So we get that information in very late, so we need to prepare everything to handle that traffic, either manual scaling or auto scaling. So based on how quickly we receive the information, we make that decision also.
Yep. So Sean, what's your spikiest application, and how do you deal with it, and when in the year does it come? What's your spiky time?
The spikiest application is our external websites. It happens usually like a week into January, right after everybody is starting to get serious about their New Year's resolution to find a new job.
After they do Slim Fast, then they...
Right. So after they sign up for the gym, they hit the website and drop in an application for that new job that they want. And that drives a lot of performance stuff for us. One of the things that we've done is we've taken a pretty intensive process. Resume parsing for us is pretty important. So that process now lives at AWS, and so we'll pull the resume in. The candidate will upload it to us, and then we'll send it to a set of servers that we have at AWS for parsing. And that saves the candidate time on entering data, gets us a little bit cleaner data, and more importantly starts to set up a model. Because one of the things that's been especially challenging is coming from a model where most of your data is in your data center, and then the thing that you want to do that's interesting is at AWS, you have a bit of a mismatch. And so it's sort of like if I want to do something interesting with all my resumes, that's fabulous. It's like they're in San Ramon and AWS is in Virginia or Oregon. So one of the things we started looking at is how do we sort of pre-stage data to AWS, even though I might not have a purpose for it yet. If I think it's interesting data that we may want to do analysis on at some point, or it's a transaction system, we're pushing that data into S3 so we can start aggregating it so that when somebody comes up, I'm not sitting there going, well, how quickly can you move 6 terabytes of data to AWS so that I can do something?
Right, so you haven't figured out the questions you want to ask yet, but you're sort of setting the stage for it.
Yeah, exactly. And just trying to cut the friction again that's going to happen.
Just because you know it's going to come.
Somebody's going to ask the question, and you're going to be sitting there with a pile of data in your data center that doesn't happen to have like 100 free servers to crunch the answer.
Yeah. Interesting. So we got about 15 minutes left. I want to let the audience ask some questions if you have some. Feel free to just raise your hand and I'll come back with the mic, and hopefully I'll get back because I actually had a couple more for you. But let's take a walk back here.
Sean, you raised this issue earlier. It's one I've heard from other enterprises. Enterprises often seem to want a roadmap from their major vendors. They want to know how to plan, not be surprised by new features that match what you've just built. Amazon isn't like that. Is that a problem for you, or are you okay with this? Would you prefer they had a roadmap more like a conventional enterprise vendor?
I think we're I think we're still so early in the cycle that I think Amazon is having a tough time building their roadmap, right? And so I think as long as the commitments that we're making are not taking away products. Like we could continue to use CloudFormation, and if we wanted to move in that direction and put more work in there, we could. So I don't think that's as bad, but it does lead to some level of frustration, but it hasn't, like that's the one big example that I can think of. I mean, Redshift was a good example of just a surprise out of the blue, right? Like, okay, wasn't expecting that at all. And so new opportunities like that are interesting. But I think when you move higher up that stack, you get more questions about the roadmap, right? So when you start talking about data warehousing and BI, people want to know where that's going, and it's maybe harder to sell that in the absence of more visibility into what's coming next. So so far for us, okay. And I think I think the point earlier was great. You know, this sort of started, you know, in 2010, right? Like most of us started messing around about then. It's still way early in the game from a standardization perspective.
Srini, any?
Yeah, sure.
What's
I
our-
think it's a big challenge. I think a lot of innovation happening in Amazon. So what we decided to do is do an annual workshop with Amazon and our partners with CSS and Sapient, who is a software management partner. So we do that once a year, and every quarter we do a half-day workshop to catch up with the progress. So it's really helping us. A couple of examples, Amazon is trying to move everything into VPC by default, so it's a very good thing. We got heads up on that. We were preparing and launching everything by default into VPC instead of putting them into EC2, then migrate them to VPC. And also helping in some database technology areas, and also S3 storage options with Glacier coming ahead. And we decided to do some things well ahead of other customers to plan our roadmap to fit into Amazon roadmap.
Okay, great. So it sounds like it's different, but it
It
works. You find a way. It's
Yeah.
sort of like other stuff.
Exactly.
Another question here, down the middle.
Hi. So as you grow your applications, do you foresee all your applications eventually moving to the cloud, or do you foresee a hybrid scenario? And in hybrid, obviously, multiple factions, whether the whole application set would move to the cloud versus parts of the application would be on-premise,
Yeah,
parts of the application would be in the cloud.
Yeah, I can give my answer, then you can do the Sean. So I think we have a lot of capital investment in a lot of enterprise applications like SAP. So we have a 7-year plan, infrastructure investment, and so I don't think those things will ever come to Amazon. Maybe after 7 years, if we do another RFP to bring them into Amazon, then, but I don't see any other reason why we can move non-SAP type of applications, which we call level 2 applications. So they can be moved to Amazon. We're doing, our CTO got a lot of attention after a big success with the digital marketing. So they are actually promoting and looking more into Amazon, trying to understand if Redshift-like technologies can be a good option for doing some quick POCs for data warehousing concepts. And our CEO is looking at digital document sharing, all these confidential documents that the big guys share. So we're posting a lot of them on Amazon and securely sharing on their iPads to all the senior folks. And R&D is trying to do a lot of things with the genome sequencing and all that stuff. There's already white paper available on that. So a lot of other areas are looking into that. I think what is stopping us, as I said, capital investment that we already had on these in our data centers, and maybe some privacy issues or compliance issues where we can move things into Amazon. We will still maintain them in our data centers.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about for you, Sean?
So much to people's chagrin, we're leaning towards starting with the assumption that it will be at AWS. Like that's where we're at now, and working back into why does it need to run in the data center. Mm-hmm. The primary driver for that being that there's there's capabilities that I can deliver via AWS that are a lot easier than I can deliver them in my own data center, right? You have multiple availability zones. I have a couple of data centers, right? I have the ability to, like when I build it at Amazon, I build it so that it's repeatable and deployable and moves, and I can test it with, I mean, there's so many things that I have trouble doing amongst our own data centers, even though we have a pretty good footprint, that it makes more sense to do it at AWS. And so that's, I mean, it's really a question of what's the right timing for individual applications. Like, are there, you know, is their infrastructure compatible? If it's not, how do we get the infrastructure compatible? What's the right time to do that? And then what's the right time to push it? But I don't think it's too far to say that our endpoint might be to not have infrastructure, not have data centers anymore. Like, that would be my ideal point. I don't think that you know, we'll see that for another 5-7 years, but we'll get there.
So cloud first, right? When you have something new that you're considering about where it should live, you got to at least answer the question why it can't be cloud.
Yeah, and even when you take, I mean, so many of, like, you have a hard time making an economic argument to say I'm going to uplift, you know, a major system to move it to the cloud, right? Like that. Usually there's another driver. Like I've got to upgrade to the latest version of that application stack. Well, great. If I've got to deploy a whole new version of that thing, then why don't I take the opportunity to change the underlying database architecture, migrate to a more repeatable deployment process, right? Do all of that stuff, and then also move it to AWS.
While you're messing with it to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, you've already got the house lifted up.
How much is refresh cycle, like one of those moments where you take a good look at it?
How much what?
How much does refresh cycle act as a catalyst? You know, less so?
Yeah, so we have so much stuff virtualized that the refresh cycle on individual servers doesn't make that much of a difference. I mean, when we're taking, you know, physical servers now and basically moving them onto VMs, even if we keep them within our data center, just so we can drive out power consumption, right? But I think the question, you know, that's a less invasive process than move to AWS. And so I think the move to AWS piece is still a part of when you're going to refresh or uplift that application, and you've got to go in and do deployments and testing and everything else. That's a better time for us anyway.
Yeah, so because you're highly virtualized, it's going to be more of a change on the application than a change on the hardware that would force the issue. And do you have mainframe or no?
No.
No mainframe.
No.
You guys have mainframe? No. Okay, two non-mainframes here. Okay, let's keep it moving here. Got a question in the front.
This question is for Srini. Srini, you mentioned like there are some privacy issues that some of the applications won't go to cloud. What can you share about that?
Well, I think if you have a SOX compliance, you tend to push that below the agenda, and you work on anything that's not any related to any government compliance to focus them and push them to cloud before you get to this. Now Amazon is also catching up. They are getting a lot of certifications. Maybe when the trend becomes if one company starts putting their SAP system in Amazon, I think a lot of people are doing dev and non-production kind of environments. I'm not seriously know how many production SAPs are in Amazon, but if you publish that number, that gets attention of a lot of enterprises, right? Yeah. All those medium-scale enterprises, that's a good opportunity for them to save a lot of money by pushing things into Amazon. Yeah.
So just to reiterate, you just need the confidence that it can be done because Amazon has already.
Yes, when you have a strict government compliance issue, you need to be careful and you need to take it slow. And anything that's not less compliant, you can easily move them. Yeah.
So. Just a couple of points. When we worked with Unilever initially during the security review and also during the workshops in 2010, we actually had two major questions from the security perspective. One is PII data and second is logging. So for the PII data, the requirement was to make sure that we retain the data within that region. So basically Amazon was able to do that in terms of we built the websites, even though that's a common website that's global, we make sure that all the databases, that's the RDS instances or the EC2 instances, are built within that region. We typically take regions like US East and Europe, Ireland, and APAC, Singapore. In some cases we do Tokyo also. So for APAC we do separate web servers, and similarly for the other two regions. The second one was about logging, and the requirement was basically to make sure that to build redundancy, they wanted to ensure the logging is done outside of AWS data center. So we came up with a custom solution. We actually partnered with one of the security vendors, Trustwave, and we built a solution around it to make sure that we build log collectors in data centers outside of Amazon, that's CSS Corp data center, and we built different collectors in 3 different regions, and we collected logs outside of AWS. This is purely for a redundancy purpose, so just in case, I mean, God forbid, and it's not going to happen that every region is going to go down, but even in that case, we will have something to prove with the logs that's outside of the data center.
Interesting.
Hi. I was wondering how you guys connect into Amazon from your corporate office and data centers. What solutions do you use to manage that connectivity?
Sure. So we use the normal VPC method. We have a VPC that everybody's set up in. For connectivity reasons, we're waiting another month or something like that until we get the direct connection up and running between US East and our MPLS network. So it's just been a matter of getting the right location for us to get the direct connect in place.
Yeah, same thing in our case. We use VPC. We didn't have a requirement for direct connection, so we didn't transfer a lot of information from our data centers to Amazon at this place. But if some other IT areas wanted to do something in the cloud, there may be a good opportunity, including Active Directory integration with Amazon. So I saw the demo this morning. This morning. Yeah. Good.
Not with Unilever, but with few of the other clients. We've used storage gateway service to connect the corporate data center to Amazon. And for one of the clients, we also use VPC device, basically to make sure that the VPC connectivity happens directly to the Amazon's data center.
So just like IPsec-based VPN?
It's typically like any of your VPN connectivity. You can even use the Open VPN, the open source VPN, and you can connect that with Amazon's VPC.
Okay, a couple more questions. I saw some more hands here. Yeah.
So it sounds like most of the drivers have not been cost-based, but have you gone back and developed ROIs on specific projects to really understand, know what the cost would have been if you deployed on-premise versus AWS?
Yeah, so I can answer that question then. So in our case, definitely it's cost-based as well as time to market. I think which is not easily measurable thing. So if we miss an opportunity, our competitor can take advantage and launch his campaign and get most of the sales happening either on their e-commerce site or their partner. So with the time to market, what we're doing is we're able to launch our concepts very, very quickly to the market, so which will result in a lot of financial benefit down the road. It is very hard to estimate that, but if we really come to an agreement with the brand managers to estimate that systematically, Unilever as a company will see a big savings from that point onwards. Without even looking at that, I can say confidently that we have this 5-year business case analysis. It's on track for after the first year, and in the next couple of years, we will start to show some savings back to the business. Because in the first year, we had to deal with the migration cost from our data center to Amazon data center. We had to purchase a lot of resort instances, which is going to show us savings down the road. Yeah. Okay.
And we still drive the cost models. We haven't talked about it at all, but whenever we're doing a new project and we're looking at doing the migration, we run the numbers. It's just we generally get to the point that we're in a range, like we're close enough that the argument is, at least on my part, that when I buy it today, I know the cost for the next 3 years. Mm-hmm. When I buy it from Amazon, I know that that's the price now, right? And so far, the declines or price decreases have always worked in our favor. So I think for us, we're mostly looking to make sure we're not doing something incredibly stupid, but also taking into account the fact that for every, the production environment's the tip of that iceberg, and all those dev and test and QA environments are the thing that nobody sees under the waterline. I mean, usually when you add those in, the costs go completely in AWS favor.
Okay, one last question if we have in the back.
One of the things that Andy mentioned this morning was really interesting to me about using AWS for inventing stuff. I mean, we've started using it for development, but are there any projects that you guys have only attempted because of the cost, because of the flexibility? And what did that look like? I mean, we went crazy when we first virtualized servers, so we had fun with that, but I'm just wondering what that looked like for you guys.
Yeah, so in my case, time to market was a big challenge because in 2010, Unilever started a new digital agenda to, I think one of the thing our CEO told us is we need to double the company in 10 years without buying new companies, so which is, we call Compass program. So that means we had to do more with less time and less money, and I think that's one of the reasons why we had to look at cloud-based vendors. Yeah. So other than that, it's business as usual for us. Yeah. Okay.
More of a straight migration for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the thing that we did only, like that we could have only done with AWS was we were in the middle of a large legal entanglement that required lots and lots of data analytics, and the only way we could have done that analytics was to use AWS. And so the ability to analyze that data probably put the AWS bill back in our pocket easily for the next couple of years. So.
Because the other alternative would have just been outrageously expensive.
It would have been a lot of hand waving and arguing as opposed to here's the actual facts about what happened.
Interesting. Well, there's a lot more questions I'd love to ask you guys. I wanted to ask you what your CFO thinks of the whole thing. I wanted to ask you what your next future plans are, but I'll have to ask you that offline and post it in a blog or something. So I want to thank Sean and Srini and Raj very much for coming and taking the time. I want to thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of the show.